Okay, safeguarding. Basically, I'm going to run through a really quick session. It's only sort of half an hour, so on safeguarding. It's a requirement we all have to do because obviously it's taken really seriously, especially in schools and educational establishments. For their point of view, it's a limiting factor from Ofsted. So if they're not very good at safeguarding, they're not going to get a very good Ofsted report, and obviously that's crucial for schools. And by going into schools, we're part of that. So we have to be showing that we've trained our volunteers and staff that are going in to know what they're doing. And safeguarding is in two sides to it, really. It's one from sort of the children's point of view, protecting the children and dealing with them in terms of abuse and that sort of thing. And also from our own points of view, making sure that we are protecting ourselves from allegations and things being made towards us. So I'm going to very quickly run through the two sides, focusing first of all on safeguarding young people. So there's obviously safeguarding is to do with child protection and forms of abuse. Anybody know how many different types of abuse there are? Four. Do you know what they are then?
No. Physical?
Yep.
Emotional?
Yep.
Mental?
It's sort of emotional, yeah. And what was the other one?
Spiritual?
Yeah, we've got physical, emotional, sexual and neglect basically are the four main types. And there's sort of key elements to all of them. Obviously physical is hitting, anything like abuse, putting cigarettes out on people, all those kinds of things are physical abuse. Emotional abuse is anything that affects the child emotionally. So things like telling them they're no good, nobody likes you, you're fat, all those kinds of things are emotional abuse. As well as sexual abuse, I think we all know what that is. And neglect is basically failure to clothe them, feed them, give them a room to stay, all those kind of things is neglect. And there's ways that we'd spot it. And because we're working with young people on a sensitive topic, they're quite likely to open up to us. You get quite close to them any time you're there. So we're doing activities like that, we're on the floor and we're in quite sort of close proximity of them. So it's sometimes signs of neglect are more visible. And people that are abusing children on a regular basis are quite good at hiding it. We're unlikely to spot sort of the main symptoms of things like sexual abuse because we're not there for long enough. So you won't notice a change in a child's character because we've only met them on that day. So for us, that's what they're always like. But things like physical abuse, quite often it's injuries in unusual places. So things like bruising and things like behind the ear, that kind of thing. Whereas if you're down on the floor with them, you might notice that kind of thing with them. Whereas if you're their teacher, you're sort of away from them, you wouldn't notice those sorts of things. And also, because we're talking about something that's quite sensitive, they are quite likely to open up and they might say something to you that you think, hang on a minute, that's not quite right. Sometimes, especially if we're there for like a day or we've gone back on a return day, we've been there for a couple of times, they may open up to you and disclose the fact that they're being abused in some way. And just in case that does happen, you have to be aware of how to handle it. First of all, if you think or you suspect a child is facing any form of abuse, you have to handle it very sensitively. Basically, you can't interview the child, so don't start asking them questions to get more information out of them. You have to say, look, tell me how you're feeling or what you're going through, and you can write down what they say to you and keep notes on it, because also you have to talk to somebody else about it later, so you need to have those notes. But don't start asking them questions, okay? You've got to let them tell you the information. We wouldn't approach anybody about it, so you certainly wouldn't ring home or anything like that, because if they were being abused, the first thing you've done is tip somebody off that you picked up on it. So you wouldn't. All you would do in our situation is to hand that information either to myself if I'm with you as a safeguarding officer, or if you're in a school and I'm not there for any reason, you would hand that on to the member of staff at the school you're working with, who would then inform their child protection officer. Okay, we don't do any more than that. So you don't get involved in any other way. You just take the information from the child and you pass it on. Really important, safeguarding overrides any form of data protection. Okay, so if someone's being abused, it overrides everything. If someone has a right to know. It's on a need-to-know basis. Obviously, you wouldn't shout about it, or even if we're in a school, you wouldn't go, guys, come here, quick, I need to tell you something. You wouldn't do that. It's on a need-to-know basis. It's written down, it's passed on to the appropriate person. And from your point of view, that's the end of. You wouldn't get any feedback on what's happening, or you wouldn't have any other further involvement other than just reporting it on to the correct person. I know sometimes that's quite hard because we want to know what's going on, but we don't actually have a right to do that. We just, literally, all you can do is pass it on. Similarly, you must never promise to not tell anybody. If a child says to you, oh, please don't tell anybody, but you can't. You have to say to them, look, I'm really sorry, but you've told me this. It's my duty to care. I've got to report it on. I'm not going to go telling everybody, but but I need to tell your child protection officer from the school. So you cannot keep a secret. Because if you did, you're not going to help the problem at all. So don't ever say to them, I won't tell anybody, because you'd be breaking the law, though we can't do that. There are sort of telltale signs that go with abuse. Most of the time, if a child confesses to you they're being abused, they're not lying. Okay, children that are being abused very, very lie about it. So obviously they know it's like a fairly serious thing. So if someone tells you something's happening, generally take that as if they're telling you fact. Obviously you would anyway, but usually if they do, that is true. Things to look out for: physical, obviously, unusual injuries, funny places. If it's really hot weather and they're wearing long sleeves and they're obviously baking but won't take the top off, that sort of thing. Sexual abuse, things like excessive knowledge. So if they're quite crude in their comments or they're being quite inappropriate, that can sometimes be a signal of things. It can also just be their teenage boy, but it can be a signal. Like obviously not sleeping very well, anorexia, all those kinds of things can be signs of sexual abuse. Neglect, if they're like obviously dirty, smelly, they've not got any lunch, they've not had breakfast, those kinds of things can be telltale signs of neglect. So it's just being aware really of the children you're working with. Again, if you're concerned and they've not said anything to you, then all you would do is attempt to get that child's name. And you can either do that by asking them to put their name in the group work, so at least you've got the name of the group, and pass that on to the teacher or myself. Or if you can, just say, what's your name there? You've got some really good comments. And just try to get their name and then just pass it on. So look, I'm a little bit concerned. I noticed during the session that such and such wasn't very well or whatever it is. And just get a name. Don't make any judgment, okay, on the child or but you're just making it. Don't judge them in any way. If they're telling you something, write it down, pass it on. No matter what you think, if they just don't have attention, take it seriously. Mainly where your involvement would be in terms of spotting abuse. The most important one from us is protecting ourselves against allegations. Obviously there will be times when you're working with a small group of pupils. There may be the odd occasion if you're in a school, if the staff members left the room and you're left with the class or something like that. That's very rare. It's going to happen. It happened to Kat the other week because the teacher left and they shouldn't have, but they did. So obviously at that point she'd be open for allegations. But there's certain ways you can protect yourselves against those sorts of things. Similarly, if you're working on stands and you're taking contact details from young people, you need to be aware and actually do that in an appropriate way. Also, if you're doing regular stands for charity and they get to know you work for us, they might approach you if they saw you in the street, so you have to be very careful about how you would conduct your conduct with them. So things like don't ever swap your personal details with anybody that you've come into contact through the charity, especially the young people. Obviously, some of us have got like, cards with our mobile numbers on, but that's in a professional way. It's on a formal SAV card. It's clear for that reason. So if someone comes to you in the street and go, you have a SAV, what's your number? So I can get you wouldn't do that. You'd have to be in a formal headed letter, that kind of thing. Don't Facebook any students you meet. Occasionally I go into school and I suddenly get these random Facebook requests come back from pupils. Don't do it. Never ever do it. If a student wants to get in contact with us via Facebook, there's a Standing Against Violence page that they can go to. That's fine. They go to the charity page, not our individual pages. You have to keep your professional distance. So if a child does, we're talking about violence, they might come up with a story, they might get really upset. And it's hard not to, because you want to sort of comfort them, and you can do that, but it's just remember to be professional. So not over the top, making sure there's people witnessing, being very open in front of the group of people. If someone starts crying, don't think, oh, I'm going to take them outside, calm down, give them a nice hug, bring them back in. Because you just open yourself up for it. So if you did take a child out of the room for any reason, if they became really emotional, leave a door open or make sure somebody, just let people know where you're going. I'm just taking so-and-so outside because they're very upset. I'll leave the door open back a minute. One, they then know that you've told somebody where you are. Two, you're easily viewable. People know what you're doing, so it's not hidden or secretive in any way. But if you can, avoid being on your own with a child. You just shouldn't do that. Similarly, things like you shouldn't give them lifts, lend them money, anything like that you shouldn't do. Just a scenario for you. Say, for example, you've been doing a workshop in a school or manning a stand or something like that. As you're leaving the workshop or the stand, you notice the people you've been working with outside the school, they're obviously quite upset. They're on their own. You're a bit late leaving, so the school's already shut up. Most people have gone home. You stop and ask them what's the matter, because they're a hysterical child. That's okay to ask them what's wrong. And they're worried. They've lost their money. They can't get home. They can't get hold of their parents. Let them know. They're really worried. Dad's going to be really angry. They ask you for a lift home. What are you going to do? Don't No, but what would you do? Would you just drive off and leave them there? What are you going to do?
Happen there,
It is. I mean, if there's no way you can contact somebody, so if you could, you would, I'd like walk across the road to the phone box and stand with them while they rung home, or you can put the money in and make the call for them, that kind of thing. If there's somebody back in school, you can escort them back into school to make the call. Those kinds of. If there's nothing around and they're absolutely stuck and destitute, what you would need to do, something sounds ludicrous, is ring a taxi, and you and your other child get in the taxi, take them to the home, and then you come back in a taxi. Okay, but you'd never travel with them on your own. You wouldn't drive them home. Obviously, it costs money. You'd have to claim back from a charity, but you wouldn't just go, I'll give you a lift home. You'd have to have that taxi driver there as a third person. So it seems like really stupid if you've got a really upset child there to not, and you've got your car, not and like they're 5 minutes away to drive. Don't ever do that, because you're opening yourself up for all kinds of allegations. There's also just your personal conduct, so the way you talk to people, like swearing or sarcasm. I mean, as adults, we're quite sarcastic. That's like our main form of humour. Especially if we're sort of coming in as an organisation, we're not teachers, we can be a little bit more informal. And I think that's when we start to get a bit sarcastic, and teenagers don't understand it. Okay, they have no comprehension, they do not understand sarcasm. They will try to join in and mimic what you're doing, but they don't understand it. And so if you're being sarcastic and you think they're getting it, quite often they're not, and that's when sort of they can make those allegations, and that's when your behaviour is coming inappropriate, because students won't recognise that as being sarcastic. And students witnessing your behaviour, if that child then makes an allegation and they come back and question them later, they will almost drop you in it. They won't go, oh, well, they're just being sarcastic, because they don't understand that. So they will take what you're saying as being literal. Same as like making any comments about students or that kind of thing. Be very careful. Again, that would leave open to sort of problems. The reason safeguarding has become such an issue is cases like the Victoria Columbier case, where that child was 8 years old and she's being abused over a massive period of time. She was being burnt with cigarettes, she was being chained up for days at a time, she was... I mean, the things that happened were disgusting, and it happened over sort of 4 or 5 year period. And during the time that it was at its worst, sort of 12 occasions over 10 months where it could have been stopped, where she came into contact with members of the NHS, where she was flagged up by the local churches, social services, even the police were involved. 10 out of those 12 occasions, so somebody could have done something. And it was noted, people had noted down that there were concerns about her treatment, but nobody did anything about it. Nobody reported it on to anybody else. None of the organisations talked to each other. People were like, we can't pass it on to that organisation, it's data protection. It's rubbish. If you've got a concern, then it needs to go on to somebody. Don't ignore it. You pass it on to the right person. Don't take it on as your own battle and start making phone calls. That's just going to land you in trouble. But if you've got a concern, even if you're like completely wrong, nobody's going to come up to you and go, that's disgusting, you're wrong, you're choose that. Nobody's going to come up to you like that. If you've got a concern, report it to your safeguarding officer. Let them pass it on to the right person, and then people will make a decision based on looking into it in more detail. Don't dismiss it. And that's what happened. Basically, people kept dismissing it, and she ended up dead. So you've got to be really careful about this. And basically, we have to apply to something called the Every Child Matters agenda, which is what the government set up to sort of stop that kind of thing happening again. And when we're working with the young people, even if it's just on the stands, that we're sort of adhering to that ourselves. So if we are concerned, get a name, pass it on to somebody. If it's at a stand and you spot something, or you overhear kids talking, or something like that, just try and get a name, write down where, what event you were at when this happened, and pass it on. Don't ignore it, basically. And also, it's really just being very careful. You don't get over familiar with people's. If they approach you and you're not working for the charity at the time, if they see you in town and they approach you, it's fine to say hi. Don't think you have to blank them. Can't talk to you, I might get accused. That's, it's just being professional and bearing your conduct in mind. If you're out and about at any time and you're approached by somebody that's met you through the charity, then you are still representing us when you talk to them. So don't think, but I wasn't working for charity, so I was representing you, because you still are. So it's just being careful and professional and maintaining that distance and just thinking about how you talk to them. Yes, we're going to talk to them more casually than like teachers or the police or something like that, because we're on a different level, so we can be more ourselves, but it's just making sure you're aware of where that line is. And that's probably much your sort of the main things really. But if you want any more information, obviously I'm a safeguarding officer, so come to me. And if anytime you are working, pass those concerns to me or to the school staff. And if we're in a school, we should know who to pass those on to. So they would then deal with it.